you had to have good genetics in plants, animals, anything you work with. For agriculture, you have to have good genetics. There is no other way. So, what he did is he founded the plant and the seed and what was it called? Anyway, he founded the USDA Plant and Seed Introduction Division. So that job, his job was to go around the world and collect the best material of all the different crops that are grown in the world and bring them back to the United States and make national collections, and then from those collections you're going to work with those things to create better agriculture. And he had this, he was the guy that formed that idea, which is amazing. Okay, before him, you know, we all sit around now and you go on the internet and you see about the doomsday vaults that are in Siberia and all the seeds that they're banked in the seed bank and all that stuff, and the EU is claiming that all the Europeans discovered this. Right now, guys, it was David Fairchild. All right, David Fairchild was the first one to do this. He worked, and the second one were the Russians, by the way. And so he started introducing mangoes from about 1885 to the 1930s. And what was incredible about it was he'd bring them in boxes like this, or in Wardian cases. What they used to do, they would have grafted trees, they would put them on the decks of ships and send them over, and in a couple months they would bring them over from India, Indonesia, Malaysia, all over the world. Okay? And he really did that. Now, that would have been, I've said before, my dad used to say it and I'll say it, I was born too late, okay? I would have really loved to have done that back in those days. That would have been fabulous, right? For one thing, because you could get on the ship and you'd go for 3 months and you had no cell phone, all right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? All right? Nobody could reach you, and you could just sit around and think about stuff and carve or do whatever you want to do, okay? So, back in this day, they were bringing in all this material, and they introduced, the original introduction station for mangoes was at Brickell. All right, Brickell, right where they have the Miami Circle, that was the Brickell introduction station, right on the Miami River. Yeah, that was it. That's the original site. And so, and I've always, if y'all know me, you know I like to push the envelope and, you know, do this a little bit. And I've always wanted to I was sitting with the state archaeologists when they discovered the Miami Circle. If y'all don't know what the Miami Circle is, it's a big circle with holes down in the rock. All right? And the theory is that that was a ceremonial place for the Tequestas, that they would put posts in those holes and then have a hut, right, or a place to have their ceremony. I suggested to them, since it was the old introduction station, that those were probably holes they drilled for planting mango trees. But anyway, it didn't go over very well. Yeah. They take that stuff serious. All right, so. But anyway, and I just put the picture there also of David Fairchild and Florence Hayden. Hayden may be a name familiar to you, okay? But I'll get to her in a second. Yeah. So, why is Florence Hayden so important? Well, Florence Hayden was so important because the combination between David Fairchild and Florence Hayden, they did something that had never happened before, okay? What they did was her husband was Captain John J. Hayden, who lived in Coconut Grove, and he took his ship, he was a captain, ship captain, and he sailed his ship up to Mangonia. You ever been to Mangonia? Mangonia still exists. It's in Palm Beach County, and it's right around Blowing Rocks, whatever that's, Whistling Rocks. What's that big? Yeah, Blowing Rocks, right? State Park, right there. Yeah. And there's still a development called Mangonia. And so David Fairchild used to originally send in a bunch of trees up to a guy named Elbridge Gale who lived in Mangonia. And he planted those trees there. They were Moldova mango trees. Now they got frozen that happened in 1898, by the way. And they got frozen in 1898. We had a bad freeze in 1898. And they grew back up from the rootstock. So when they grew back up and they fruited, he sold, Captain John J. Hayden, he sold 6 fruit off of those trees that he still called Moldovas. And Hayden took them back to Coconut Grove and he ate the mangoes. By the way, he paid $1 a piece for mangoes back in 1899 or something like that. You know, really? Come on, $1 a piece? Those are good mangoes, right? You know, so that was pretty good though. And then he sailed back, and he died. And then Florence Hayden grew up, planted those seeds, and took care of them, and grew those trees up. And then the way the story goes, in 1910, at the Florida State Hort Society, which was in Ocala, you got to remember, at this time, the only mango that anyone had ever seen in this state were those little tiny turpentine mangoes. They'd never seen anything else. And Mrs. Hayden, who was holding a Hayden mango in her hand right there from the original tree, the tree behind her is the original tree, and she reached up under the podium at the Florida State Hort Society and pulled out a Hayden mango and held it up. And they say that there was a across the audience. Right? If I had a Hayden, I would have done that right there, but I didn't happen to have a Hayden. So, and that changed the world. That changed the mango world forever. So, why did that change the world? Okay, top photo there on the left, that's a Moldova. You have, so in the early 1900s, there was a mango industry here in South Florida. There was also a small one over on the west coast, but this was really the bigger concentration of them. You have Moldova trees, which were the original introductions from India. You had Totopuri, which is down here. We also call that Sandershaw, which is a mango still grown today in India. That's the #1 mango used for pulp in India. Pulp means juice and flesh, you know. Then you had a turpentine. The Moldova crossed with the turpentine, gave you the Hayden up on the right. Okay? Sandershaw crossed with turpentine. This is a Brooks Lake. Call it Brooks Lake. And that was the cross there. It was these 5 fruit, 2 introductions and 2 new hybrids or 3 introductions and 2 hybrids that built the Florida mango industry. All right, and all of that land from Miami up to North Miami, up through Lemon City, and all through there were all planted with mangoes. And they used to take those mangoes, and the reason they were right on the East Coast, by the way, there was only the East Coast then. The rest of this place was Everglades. Okay, this was still the swamp then, and there was still I mean, you have to remember how young Florida is and how young South Florida is. They were still trading with Indians, with Seminoles, up until about 1910, up on Old Cutler Road. Okay? There still was a Seminole trading post up on Old Cutler Road at that point. So, when all this was going on, though, the mangoes were all concentrated right up there along the railroad tracks. So they could sell them up in New York. And so they used to send all those mangoes up to New York. Next slide. Now, 1930s to the 1960s, that's when things really went wild. Why? What happened? Well, you had all that concentration of genes that David Fairchild had brought in, and all these new varieties that were here. You had everybody sandwiched on this little wedge of land that runs right down the ridge along this East Coast. Because all you had to do was get off of that ridge a mile or 2, and you were out in the sawgrass. I mean, again, you know, you can't really. You have to understand. I mean, things have really changed in South Florida. Okay, when I was born in Homestead here, okay, in Homestead Hospital, And Jim, you grew up on Campbell Drive, right? Up around there. Well, you know, Homestead had nothing. We had to go, my parents would drive me up to Miami and drop me off at underneath that big horse that was in Dayland Mall. And that's all that we had to do. I mean, you know, you didn't have anything else, so we could go and they'd go shopping. Because there were no stores south of Dayland, right? You had to go to Miami. You had to buy your furniture up at that modern age, which was way up there around. Come on, man, it was crazy. But what was happening was you had all of these, you know, you had this concentration of people with brains and interest and knowledge, and you had the genetics, and they created this perfect storm of mango breeding and selection that the world has never seen before. All right? It created the Tommy Atkins, which is on the top up there. You have Kit across the middle. You have Kent over on the right. Those were the ones we all know. But it created hundreds of varieties. Anderson, Alice, Becky, Glenn. You've heard of Glenn. My dad used to tell me, we used to sit around the table, and I was born in '64, and in the '70s we'd sit around and my dad would say, son, one day the mango will be a commodity, right? Now, that was the kind of discussions we had around the table. And I'd say, son, one day the mango would be a commodity. And I remember always thinking that. I was like, what does that mean? One day the mango will be a commodity. Well, what he meant was that one day everyone would know these things, and they do it. And he said, but it's going to take time. It's like being a barge captain on the Mississippi, okay? You know, things are inevitable, but they take a very long time before you hit the bridge, okay? You know what's going to happen, but you can't turn or get out of it, right? It's the way it is with genetics and mango varieties, all right? Same idea. So they started in the 30s through the 60s, they started on this long road. Well, this is 2018, right? Let me tell you, this is what we live now. We live what they did in the 1930s and the 1940s in genetics of mangoes. We still live in those, and I'll tell you why in a second. The other thing my dad always used to tell me, by the way, he'd say there were literally hundreds of very good Florida mangoes that were selected in Florida that are better than anything that was ever created anywhere else in the world. And they'll all be lost unless you put them in a collection and wait and see what's going to happen, by the way. And that's why we did what we did. Now, Hayden, Tommy, Kit, Kent. The creation of the Hayden was an incredible event, and then the creation of these other three varieties changed the world as we know it. And what happened was they mostly were red, except for Kit, which doesn't have very good color. And by the way, the Kit, you know where the Kit came from, right? First of all, let me tell you. Hayden came from Coconut Grove. Tommy Atkins came from Fort Lauderdale. Kit came from Homestead. Kent came from downtown Miami. That's where they all came from. All right? That's where those all came from. This Kit, I used to know the granddaughter. Them. They lived out here west in Homestead. Kind of a funny family. I don't know. They seemed a little odd. I don't know. I didn't know her very well. But these were incredible mangoes because they were beautiful. They had a high productivity. They were adaptable. They could go through a modern cold chain, and they blended in with modern production. So essentially what Florida did is we made mangoes into the industrial food chain, okay? So you can either say that was a horrible thing we did, or you can say that was an amazing thing we did. We did both. We created something that had never existed, that fit into a food delivery system that had never existed, and then a lot has gone wrong with that. But it was an amazing event, and this was something that is still today. So I work for a company that we do close to 8 million boxes of mango, right? Those 8 million boxes of mangoes that we bring into the United States. So there are 100 million boxes, 10-pound boxes of mangoes imported in the United States. 100 million. That's a lot of boxes, okay? And of those, 80% are those 4 varieties. So still today, 80 million boxes of these mangoes get imported in the United States, right? And I work with these mangoes each and every day in all the countries of this hemisphere. And in other hemispheres too. So it's an amazing thing. But that's not what makes you guys amazing about it, nor me, by the way. This is my day job, all right? This is the job that puts shoes on my kids' feet, right? Now, but that's not what gets me excited, all right? That's not what makes me happy that I live in South Florida. I would never live anywhere else in the world. Not because of this, but because of this. Next slide. So, Fairchild, USDA, University of Florida, nurseries, fruit councils, citizens. We all can go out and get ourselves a permit to import fruits, and well, not so much anymore. It used to be. You used to be able to get a permit to bring in genetic material of different kinds of fruit. There we go. So, because of this, when I started in Fairchild, like I said, about 30 years ago. And first thing I did was say, you know what we need to do? We need to go out and we haven't had any introductions, any real new introductions of mangoes since about the 1920s and 1930s. Everything had stopped being introduced then. There was a little bit, but not much. So that's why we created the program we created up in Fairchild. So I spent my career going around the world and collecting mangoes. Norris, and other plant collectors we had, but mainly Norris and I, brought in about 500 accessions. Okay, that's 500 varieties. So I went to every country, all the breeding programs, to bring in new mangoes. Why? Is that for me? No. It is for the next generations. It's what's going to happen in 60 years. All right? I'm going to be dead. Hopefully they will speak nice about it. That's all I have. All I have. But anyway, the difference, what we were looking for was diversity. So I wanted things that were greener, purpler, longer, smaller, more tart, more, whatever. I wanted the extremes. I didn't go to find, we already had 500 or 200 mango varieties that were good and red and could ship and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want that. So all of you all know Gary Zill. Gary Zill and I used to sit around way back in the day. I'll tell a story about Gary. He just got divorced, trying to reevaluate his life. And we said, what we're going to do? We need to go out and bring in all these mangoes that y'all are bringing in, and then we're going to select for flavor, not select for shipping. Wow, there's an idea. All right? And so that's what we did. Okay? Next. And what happened? Well, I'm all about benchmarks in one's life. Okay? So my benchmark in my life is we created a new generation of mango. All right? I know when you guys sit around, you're not thinking of Tommy, Kit, and Ken. You're not. Why not? You're thinking about pina colada, orange sherbet, emerald, blah, 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 blah. You're thinking about all those crazy new ideas and flavors and colors and all that sort of stuff. That's emerald up there. This is orange sherbet. The one in the middle above is an Angie. You have Ceci Love. You have Diamond. And you have Sunburst. Okay? That's just the beginning. Just the beginning. Okay? It takes time to do these things. But this is what keeps me up at night. This is what I sit there and I dream about and draw out my planting for my little orchard. Okay, again, I go around the world and work on, I manage 5,000 hectares of mangoes in Mexico. 5,000 hectares, that's 12,000 acres that I manage in Mexico. And that is the most boring thing you can imagine. And the reason it's boring is not a single one of those trees produces this. Nothing like this. Okay? So, when I go out and I talk to Sam's Club, I can't even bring this concept up to him. I can't get the concept of this mango to him. You see this mango? This is all red and beautiful, right? So you think, well, this is probably some sort of a Tommy Atkins or something like that, right? This is a Tommy Atkins seedling crossed with a Southeast Asian mango, and also has genes of a wild mango. And this thing tastes like nothing you've ever, you can't imagine what this thing tastes like. It's not like a Tommy. And, that's a concept that commercial stores aren't ready for, all right? Not to mention the new buyer for Sam's Club is 22 years old. So, I got a kid over the thing, all right? You're 22 and you don't know anything. I'm sorry. You think you do, but anyway. I knew everything when I was 22. So, we have this. We're just beginning, and it's amazing. Now, we're going to do a little, I like to go forward and come back, go forward and come back. So what were we doing also during all of that? We were collecting wild mangoes. None of these things in this picture are mangoes. Okay? Remember when I said the mango came from India? Again, in my house, that's what I learned. Mangoes come from the foothills of the Himalayas. My first book, I wrote that. Mangoes come from the foothills of the Himalayas. Why did I write that? I didn't know any better. That's what they taught me. I learned that in school, that the mangoes come from the foothills of the Himalayas. You know what? It's a lie. They don't. They don't. We haven't proven it genetically yet, but they will. Don't worry, we'll prove it genetically. But I'm a horticulturist. I'm not a genetics guy. All right? I'm a horticulturist. I want to be able to put my hands on this stuff. All right? I haven't shown you a single genetic tree yet, right? I haven't. There's a reason for that. Because I use those things, but I don't want to show you that because I care about what it creates. Creates these things. So, in my crazy world, one day, many of you all know Bill Whitman, who was one of the founders of the Rare Fruit Council in Miami. Bill, at the time, I was traveling around the world with Bill 30 years ago. All right? He was looking for durians and langsats and all sorts of exotic fruit. And I was walking around the streets of Borneo, and I was looking at mangoes. Except they weren't mangoes. I'm looking at things and I'm thinking, hey, hold on a second. There's a whole other world here of things that aren't mangoes. And it ties to their language. There are words, individual language words. Every single tribe had a name for every single species. Which means that These things, you know, these were distinct. These came around before the mango. And by the way, in Borneo, there are no mangoes. There are no Magifera indica. And by the way, I'm going to tell you that there is no species Magifera indica. That's going to be the next thing that the world's going to find out one day. All right? Eventually we'll get there, I'm telling you. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So, after we saw this, I said, you know, wow. And then I went to a talk by a crazy Dutchman and a young French guy named Bompard, and he's the Frenchman, and Kosterman, the crazy Dutchman. Okay? The crazy Dutch guy had lived in Borneo his whole life, right? And he was truly insane. Okay? A botanist living and he was crazy, but he was fabulous. Great guy. And Bompard was this very enthusiastic young French guy who was doing all the collecting. And I went to their talk in 1992 up on Miami Beach, and he said, there are 69 species of relatives of mangoes that need to be saved. And I went, that's something to do for the next 30 years, okay? And so, that's what I did. I went around and I decided that I was going to collect those species and bring them back here and do something with them. All right? Now, trouble is, there are no books written on this. Nobody tells you how to be a plant collector. No one tells you how to do this, okay? I assure you, there are no courses at the University of Florida or Copenhagen or anywhere in the world that tells you how to go out and be a plant collector. There is actually one that they're trying to make at Yale. Which I just find funny. I don't know why, but anyway, why Yale? Why Yale? I'll tell you why. Because it's not a horticultural pursuit. It is, but you got to think outside the box in order to be a plant collector. All right, it has a whole set of skills that have nothing to do with anything except being able to graft, and you know, you do have horticultural skills there, but there's a lot of other skills. So that's what I did. Next slide. Go back into the old records of David Fairchild. David Fairchild was on to this long ago, and he tried this, okay? Back in the late 1800s, they went to Borneo. This is a picture taken in Sarawak, and these fruit are about that big. That's a Magifera species right there. That's Magifera, well, now it's Magifera Costermanii or something like that. And Fairchild tried to introduce these things. One of the things that I got to tell you, though, was after 100 years, none of these existed in the United States. None of them were here. So he failed, right? My dad, when I came home and I came back from the day I saw Kostermans and Bompard give their talk, he said, "Son, don't do that." He says, "David Fairchild tried to do that. You're going to fail." Now, he didn't mean it that way. He said, you know, there's other things you should do. Just make sure you do other things while you're doing that, because there will be a lot of failure. And I got to tell you, plant breeding and all those things, you focus on the failures. You don't focus on the successes. It's very hard to get your head around it, right? You get depressed when you don't work it out. Broken dreams and all that kind of stuff. Right? So, next slide. When you start going to Borneo and you start looking for these wild mangoes, you see one of the first problems, okay? That's a 150-foot tree. And there are no branches for about 80 of those feet, all right? Let me tell you something, I'm a good tree climber. I've been climbing trees since I was a little kid. But when you're in Borneo, things are a little unfair, okay? Because, first of all, that trunk's big and it's hard to go up that tree. There's another thing is, those trees are full of bullet ants and different kinds of wasps that are not fun. And the Bornean stinging creatures are very smart. Okay, they have won. All right, the humans have lost there. And the reason they have done it is because these guys have it all figured out. So when you get up there, they don't go after you right away. They wait till you get up about 100 feet, and then they get you. And oh my God, if you've ever been stung by bullet ant, it's not recommended because they call them bullet ants for a good reason. You feel like you've been shot. And it makes you want to fall out of the tree. All right? And you don't want to fall out of the tree 100 feet up the tree. So, that was our first thing that I noticed. These trees are big. Not going to be easy to get these things, right? Next slide. They also don't look anything like mangoes. Look like potatoes. They look like something, but they don't look like a mango, right? And nobody there, nobody who's a self-respecting mango person works on these, all right? What do you become if you work on these things? You become a wacko, okay? So I was a wacko for a long time because what am I looking for this for? This, by the way, these are white inside. This is a Magifra Aquanata, also white, also known as Juanite. And this is a balunu. This is a sweet one. All right, there are sweet ones and there are sour ones. And just like anything, it's just, there are multiple different kinds of them and everything else. And you go around and people do grow these, but they grow them. This is old style. If you go back to the derivation of the term orchard versus grove, okay, you know the horticulturally what that means. A grove is a cultivated wild stand of trees. An orchard is planted and cared for in groves, usually. Okay? So, orcharding was something that came out of Europe. Tending to groves is a native people's endeavor. You go into a forest, you find something you like, you start to take care of it. Maybe you find a way to control the bullet ants so you can climb up the tree. Okay? That's what you do. You negotiate with the orangutan who by the way, if you all have ever seen me talk about this stuff and you've seen the Fruit Hunters movie and all that sort of stuff, I talk about orangutans guarding these groves of wild mangoes. And honest to God, they really do. And they post sentries and the whole thing. The orangutans, they got it going on, okay? They're pretty smart. And they're also big. All right, and they don't, if you want to get into one of those groves, if you want to go see a grove of caesias, you better bring something with you, right? And one of the things we found is just bring them something that looks better than that on the outside. Because you can fool orangutans with good-looking, you can fool orangutan with a tummy attitude. Okay? I just don't want to stay around once he figures it out. That's the only trouble. And it's not really very nice to do to them, so I didn't. I would normally bring them something very good in order to negotiate to get into the grove, okay? But they actually would. They would make sure, the people that, it's kind of neat to do that. But anyway, next picture. So, the top picture there, that's called Limban, which is in Sarawak, right on the border with Bandar Seri Begawan, Brunei Darussalam, the country. And you see the rivers are very close to the ocean. That big tree that's growing there, that's a wild mango. That's what happens in a lot of these areas. They leave those trees and they cultivate that. The reason they do is this is very near Bandar Seri Begawan, which is the capital of Brunei Darussalam. Brunei Darussalam has the highest per capita income of any country in the world, okay, because of oil. Right? So everybody there, if you are a Bruneian, you get a stipend of $60,000 a year. Nice. Okay, I'm liking that country. You can't immigrate there, by the way. They have like Donald Trump Jr. over there. They can't. No, I can't tell. They have a Donald Trump kind of guy, and you cannot. That's because everyone wants to immigrate there to get $60,000 without doing anything. Okay, but this is very close to there, so they come down and buy their fruit here. So that's why the people of Limbang leave the trees and don't cut anything down, because they can sell them for good money. Some of these Magifera species are incredible. You see here, this is called Magifra Aquanata, and that is a 10-pound fruit. It's a big mango, all right? And then you also have little tiny ones like this. That fruit is about this big, and this one is from Peninsular Malaysia. And that one is called Magifra Aquanata. And that one is so acid that when you eat it, your teeth hurt just eating it. Okay, it is so acid. But let me tell you something. Acidity, like that, translates to a lot of health and disease resistance. Because acidity is the key to controlling fungi, by the way, in all of our biorational chemicals that we're creating and everything are all about lowering pH. So, and the other amazing thing about these things, this is that's actually in Kalimantan, and some of these trees grow right in the water, right in streams, rivers, mangroves. Some of them grow in mangrove swamps. So they're very interesting. Yes, next slide. So we spent about 30 years flying around, jumping from country to country. This was our most important collecting tool. You just find yourself a collaborator in the country. That was a hard part. Collaborators are other crazy people who want to do this, but these are people that live there. And you say, hey, I'm going to give you this cell phone, prepaid cell phone, when your thing fruits, can you give me a call? And they do. And they did. And we would go back and collect. So that was kind of cool. All right, that was really neat. And so we would go there, we'd fly around. Next slide. You go in by canoe. Now, this is not mangoes, but I do have to tell this one story, because just in case you think that we humans are superior in any way to other creatures on this planet, I'm going to tell you you're wrong, because you see those at Jack's feet right there, those are durians. That's called Duriodelsis, okay? If you've ever smelled the Duriodelsis, okay, it smells, it's just like a rattlesnake, okay? It's in your genes. You know what that smells like. You just never smelled it, all right? And that's because we have a lot of genes that come from orangutans, all right? And orangutans can smell these things from a long way away. I'm in a canoe. We're going along this river. I smell this. I don't know what it is, but I knew it instantly when I smelled it. It was a mile away in a jungle. And we went there and found it. Honest to God. And Jack told me, he said, I may be a little more orangutan than a lot of people or something. But I said, well, maybe I am. I don't know. But I can do that. Now, a lot of these Magiferas, these wild mangoes, they evolved to be distributed by orangutans. So they have that same aroma. You can smell a Magifera Pajang a mile away in the forest. No problem. You can do it. And you know what it is when you smell it. I'm telling you, you do. You just don't know you know until you see it. But it's the most amazing thing I've ever run across. It was just wow. It was like, wow, I didn't know. So anyway, but you would take, we go by canoes and everything. Next slide. And then then you get there, and this would be the problem again, because these trees are big and giant. Now, after all of this work and all of these things, you'll get there and you find this tree. But getting budwood is actually not the hardest part, okay? We'd actually build scaffolding around these trees. Stay there for a couple days, get bamboo, build scaffolding in order to get up into these trees, because again, even the local people won't go up these trees because they know what's going to happen once you get up there. All right, so you go on the scaffolding, and you can negotiate with the bully. Okay, now, and by the way, that's why these trees are not covered in epiphytes. They're not all covered up in orchids and everything else, because the bullet ants keep them clean. Right? That's their job. That's the trade-off they get. They help protect the tree, and the tree, and so they also keep you from it because they don't know what you're doing. Now, the trouble is though, once you get that budwood, what are you going to graft that on? Yeah, I see our grafter sitting here, and he's thinking, good question, right? It is a good question, because there's 69 species. Are they graft compatible with Magifra indica? Well, I had a great aha moment. First time I went to Borneo, my friend there I used to work with the guys in Brunei, Jerusalem, before 9/11, and I go there, and he tells me, well, no problem, we graft all of our mangoes on these 3 different rootstocks, on Rubra pedala and blah, blah, blah. And he listed a couple different rootstocks. Next time I go back, after a year, I plant the seed, I bring the seeds back, I get them planted, I have them grown in my nursery, I'm all ready to go. I go back, and I say, and I'm with Gary Zill this time, and we get the budwood. And he says, Gary's talking to him as we're collecting budwood, and he says, so, we're going to graft these on Rubra pedala and everything. And the guy looks at it and says, why are you going to do it? For a second. I know that. Wait, whoa. I said, because a year ago you told me that's what you use to graft them on. Well, yeah, maybe. And then I realized that there's a lot of maybes out there, all right? So part of the problem was, after you get all this stuff, you start to realize why David Fairchild, after 100 years of doing this, never ended up with any trees growing in South Florida. All right, the only Magifera species that was growing in all of our collections in South Florida, right? You guys, when you were over picking at Trek, you probably saw it. We used to have it at USDA, we had it at Fairchild, and that was Magifera Aquanata. It's the only one. Only one that was in the collections of the United States before I started at Fairchild. And that was from a single introduction back by David Fairchild back in 1905. All right? The only one that lived. Okay. But after, I guess the way, if you all know Nerese, when I used to work with Nerese, she would always say she was lucky. I don't know if it's luck or, stupidity on my part, but you keep working on this stuff, and we had success. And we ended up with about 12, maybe 15 of these species that we got established here in Florida. Next. But I told you, those aren't the ones I remember. I remember the ones that got away, all right? I'm a fisher, okay? You remember the one you didn't catch, right? This is Magifero Magnifica, and this is growing right outside, right in front of a mosque. And this is post 9/11, and I'm an infidel, okay, in their eyes. And so I can't go up this tree. Now, the way, we used to collect these, to get budwood off of these trees, we'd use guns. And we'd shoot the branches. Shoot the ends of the branches to get the budwood off. A lot less bullet ants that way. Right? But you cannot stand in front of a mosque as an infidel with a gun and shoot branches off of trees. All right? I tried. I tell you, I tried, and I ended up in jail. So you don't do that. You don't do that. Not recommended. Not recommended. But, so we never got bloodwood of this tree. All right? This is what Magifero Magnifica looks like. Now, what's so interesting about this is a mango that looks like a regular mango, almost, but it's white-fleshed. And it's like, you know those non-melting flesh peaches that they tried to market on all of us, and that dirty trick they did to us about 15 years ago, where they tried to get us to eat those peaches that stay like rubber? All right, so that's what this is. That's exactly what that thing looks like inside. There's no fiber, and when that thing ripens, it just, your teeth go right through it. It's amazing, though. So it's like a non-melting flesh peach, except it melts. No fiber, and an incredible fruit. If you go back to the late 1800s, and you went in peninsular Malaysia around and by the way, I highly recommend, if you really want to carry on to your MangoMania development, okay, there's a couple of places you have to go. And one of them is Peninsular Malaysia, and you go to Kuala Lumpur, and you drive all the way down to the Singapore border, and there's that state is called Johor, and Johor is where they used to grow this. There used to be thousands of acres of this grown. But they don't do it anymore because now they grow tiny apples. Oh, the crimes of the world, isn't it? Oh my God. Yes, but anyway, next. Magifra Aquanata. I get asked by a lot of people, whatever happened to the Wani? Well, never found anything they would graft on. Never. Couldn't ever find anything with graft on. I don't believe it's a mango. The genetic data tell me it's a mango. I don't believe it. Now, that could be anti-intellectual, that could be whatever you want to call it, but I don't believe it because I tried to graft that on everything I could ever find, and I never could get that thing to live. Does not mean that I'm right, but I think eventually we're going to find out that that is not really a Magifero, because I don't buy it. And the other thing is, if you look at the seed on the Wani, the seed is actually, you can pull it open like this. It doesn't have a suture. Mango, look at any mango seed. There's a single suture that goes around the stone. All right, the stone on this seed it spirals. And to me, I've had this argument with a million geneticists and all that sort of. There aren't a million. There's about two. I've had this argument with the two guys. It felt like a million.
They have the knowledge of millions.
I know. And they tell me, oh yeah, it's a Magifera. I'm not buying it. And I'll tell you the other hint that it's not a mango. In the language, they don't call this a mango. They don't consider it a mango. So, I told you, they call it balunu. And if you look at so many of the other names, you can get that they're mangoes. But this is not a bua or a palam or any of that. So, I'm not buying it. But anyway, who knows? Next.
Did you ever get any seed of that in to grow or die?
We can always get the seeds. We can get the seeds to grow. They grow up and they die. So, it's probably because of some sort of a mycorrhizal association. I do know of still one tree that's alive. I won't divulge where it is because I won't have to get, but you know who has the tree. She has one still alive, but it's barely alive. So, Magifra Aquanata. Another one. Now this one I could get to grow. And this is one I was really interested in because if you know Pajang, it gets huge. And this is a very interesting fruit. It gets the reason we're interested in these is these things have tolerance to diseases. And that's why we're so interested in it. But Pajang is a kind of an interesting mango. If you get that latex that's on this fruit on you, you can just feel, you can watch it burn as it goes down. All right, this stuff is pretty caustic. All right, but hey, that's okay. You just don't get the sapler. That's what you're good. We were able to graft it. They would live, but they would die. All right, so we were never able to keep the tree alive. So they would die before we ever even got them into the field for cold. Okay, next. Sometimes things happen. Maybe it's fate. Maybe it's born under an unlucky sign. I don't know. Magifra torquenda, this is one of the fruit that I truly love. Those are relatively small ones. They get quite big. This is a Freestone Mango. Beautiful fruit. Totally tolerant to everything. Nothing gets on this thing. So clean. It's amazing. Had the tree growing, got run over by the installer of the Chihuly glass up at Fairchild. That's not good. Okay, that's a bad thing. All right, but things happen. All right, next. And that, by the way, that was Rosalind. That's our cooperator in Sarawak that we were working with. So, told you I like benchmarks. All right, the benchmarks after all of that is I'm gonna give you the story that's gonna come out one day. I'm gonna tell you now what's gonna happen. And again, I cannot prove it, but I'll bet you I'm right. All right. There are 3 groups of wild mangoes that got out of Borneo. All right. And what I mean by that, there's 60. I told you there were 69 edible species, probably a few more, right? Some of those edible species bear every 3rd generation. You had to go and find a person like 100 years old that had ever seen them bear. All right, those are probably going to stay in the jungles of Borneo, and I don't think we're ever going to see them out. All right, there are those kind of ones, and then we would go forever, and you would find those are the ones that are the village trees that they pray to, and they. They're incredible, and they need to be preserved and all that sort of stuff, but I don't think they're ever going to get out here until maybe one day when we have a new genetic way and we can get genes out and do that. Maybe, I don't know. But while we are still limited by carrying out genes and getting live plants out, I will say that there are 3 groups of wild mangoes. This is the one, and this is the Magifra fetida. All right? Now, if you've ever seen Magifra fetida, you've ever gone around to Malaysia and traveled, it's called fetida for a reason. Okay? Except, well, no, it's not. It's called fetida because it was named by Europeans. Okay? And Europeans say this is fetid. Fetid means it smells like rotten, like death. It's death stuff, okay? This does not smell like death, okay? What this smells like is it's human. No, not human. It's primate. It's simian. All right. It really smells like things you don't expect to find in a fruit, I guess is the way to put it. But again, it's because this thing was evolved to be moved around and consumed by orangutans, right? So there are about 20 of the 69 species, about 20 of them are very similar to this. All right? And by the way, this is the one that when I said Magifra odorata, We call it Durian Mango. We have a lot of other uncharitable names for this mango. This is one that got to India and and got out of Borneo. And this is one, by the way, you can trace this taste in mangoes. This is one that got into commercial Magifera indicas. So when you smell a Tommy Atkins, what do you smell? It's fetid. It smells like this. And I bet you anything that that disease tolerance that Tommy Atkins has is coming from that. Because of that aroma. All right? So, and I'll give you, this is a seedling of Tommy Atkins, by the way. And it has absolutely zero good smell. It does not smell good. This one doesn't smell like anything. It has no aroma. Okay? But I bet you if you analyze deep enough on an HPLC, you'd pick up some of that in there. Okay, so there's one group that we call the the Magifera fetida group that got out of Borneo and in India. The other one is Castores, okay? Magifera Castores. Now those are purple or red. Where did our red come from? Most of the wild mangoes, only one, there's about 20 species of these, very similar to these, that ended up, and you can find these in India, along with those Magifera fetidas. And I think that's where our Indian mangoes came from. Were the genes out of these plus the Magifera fetidas that we ended up, that's where we got red color. Because before, remember what I said, the lowest common denominator of a Magifera, the wild type of a mango is yellow. And it doesn't have red. Actually, it has red if it gets the right conditions. Right? Next slide. And then the third group, that there's about 20 or 30 that got out, all kind of look like this. Yellow, they're acid, some of them are pretty good, they don't have any fiber. What are these? These are the ones that went to Vietnam and Cambodia, Thailand, all through there. None of those mangoes look like the mangoes of India. Alright? How do you explain that mangoes evolved in India, on the foothills of the Himalayas, if you have these mangoes sitting out in Asia that are genetically distinct from them, and yet we call them mangoes? And by the way, the mango that we like in Florida, and that a lot of the ones, those of us that we have an affinity for, are these type, because we like the acidity. All right? Y'all know me, again, you know I like acidity. I like mangoes that bite you back. I don't want, sickening sweet. When we have Indian customers come to our mangoes, to buy mangoes, I always tell the boys, they don't cut up our mangoes for them, because they're going to turn up their nose at them. And it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel bad, but it shouldn't make you feel bad. They just like mangoes that are so sweet, and they don't want any of that acid. And I'm like, okay, cool, They're wrong, but I put that one in there too, always. So I always tell them, one day you will evolve to a higher
So what's the Latin name?
And of course, if you know people from India, they know that, as Indians will tell you, they forgot more about mangoes than I've ever known, which is true also, that they really know mango jazz. So this is the Mempalam type. So these are things like, Mempalam is the group. So these are Magifera, Rubropedala, Magifera, Hamilis. There's, again, about 20 of these things out there. Now, none of this has ever been genetically proven. And I can tell you right now, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen this time around, okay? It'll be another generation before we actually resolve this, because the people working on the genes have fallen victim to my no, we haven't done it on purpose. What it is collections are woefully mislabeled and wrong. And when the genetics people doing the work don't know this, and they can't identify these things, and so they're facing, and so this is going to be pretty messed up for a long time. It's going to take, we're probably 20 years before this gets resolved. I hope my son will be able to be there when that occurs. I don't think I'll ever see them actually resolve all this, but I do think that's where they'll end up with. That you're going to have Fetida types, you have Karamud types, and you have the Mempelon types. Yeah.
Is with all this mix up, can you say positively there's corn sugar?
Well, yeah, because I was involved in the breeding of that one, so I know what the mango is. So I will tell you, this is orange sherbet. Now, the reason is because I was working with Gary 30 years ago when we collected the seeds off of the lemon meringue tree, the Bukukalai, and this was the seed of them. And this is the original orange sherbet. But that's because, I mean, again, I had an unfair advantage in doing that. We also did all of the DNA mock-up and the patenting.
I would love to buy one, but I think at this point I'm so skeptical, I don't know.
You know, and in that, I have to tell you that I don't have a good answer for you on that one, because I can tell you right now, it is really messed up. I mean, like most of the orange sherbets that I've seen coming from the West Coast are lemon meringue. Almost all of them are. And a lot of them you see coming out of the East Coast, the same thing. That people have it very mixed up. Now, or there'll be lemon zest, which is was a sister. So lemon zest is a sister of this. All right, but yeah, there is a lot of confusion. Now that's not even. I mean, that's confusion on the end of the pipeline. The confusion on the beginning of the pipeline, though, actually starts. It means that whatever conclusions you draw at the end are kind of questionable. So, you know, eventually with all genetics, it's going to come down to we're all going to talk about gene points, and we won't even talk about names. And then in the world, everyone gets crazy, and there's all sorts of names being thrown around. What's real, what's not. So we named this morning, by the way. This just has a number until this morning. Now this is Big Sad, all right? But we bred it, so it's okay that we called it that, right? But it's, I can tell you that there will probably, in a very short time, be other Big Saturns out there, because other people will want to sell this mango, will want to sell a mango and ride upon its success. That's what happens too. That's why people will oftentimes say it's an orange sherbet, because you know, we give a pretty good name to orange sherbet, so people want to call it that. So anyway, next. Now, besides the naked children picture, this is Papua New Guinea. And one of the things we do that we have been very successful at is going, so again, when you go to Borneo, all your mangoes there are forest, you know, forest, and they're not adapted to South Florida at all. All right? But when you start going, and so one of our theories always was, if you go to the outliers of the range of these crops, you'll find things that are more adaptable, because these are things living on the edge of adaptability. You can't get more on the edge than Papua New Guinea, by the way. You know, all of these kids, you know the reason they're all closing their mouth? Because they don't, if you take pictures of kids in Papua New Guinea, their teeth are normally stained with beetle nut, which stains their teeth red. And it's what gave a lot of people the idea that they were cannibals. All right? And so all the kids are always embarrassed, and they always put their mouths down because they don't want to see that they have red teeth. They all have red teeth. It's kind of weird. But anyway, and by the way, if you don't believe, I didn't put a picture up here out of deference to my friends in Papua New Guinea, because I love this country. Okay, if I had to hang out in a country, this is the country that I hang out in. I'm telling you. Go to Papua New Guinea if you get the chance. And believe it when they tell you that they were cannibals, okay? Because if you, I always make my own necklaces and things, and when you go to a tribe, you trade your necklace with the chief, all right? And that's called bagi, all right? And this obligates you to trade with them, all right? And this was what a lot of outlying villages, anywhere in the world, in the Amazon, wherever, it's a very common thing where you make that trade. But then it also obligates you. It's a pact between you and them, okay? Once you have their necklace, then that's like entrance fee to the skull cave, okay? Man, that is like, my gosh. So, we're talking people living on the edge of survival, okay? And what they would do is, when they would win battles, they would, they didn't have enough food, so they would eat people. So it's like, wow, okay. I've seen the skull cave, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of skulls. You don't want to make these guys mad? Okay.
Me too.
All right, anyway, we got stuck in this village. Our boat broke. That's a Magifra tree behind me. All right. We got stuck on this beach, and we were trying to get the boat fixed. One of the little kids comes up to one of our chubbier friends that were there. He pokes him with a stick. I almost died. I thought the kid was laughing. And I said, oh man, that's good. Anyway, these mangoes out here, this is a species that we don't even have identified yet. And this is the ocean. And this is that tree.
Oh, wow.
And the roots are growing right in the ocean.
Oh, wow.
All right? That's potential. That's important. All right, next slide. This shows you the fruit, by the way. And by the way, that's the bagi right there. That's what your necklace, you get that necklace, that gets you in that gets you in anywhere. And that's what the fruit looks like. But we're not looking at this as a fruit. We're looking at this as a rootstock. All right? And this was actually my last trip I ever did while working for Fairchild. So these trees are still very small, but we're very interested in these and their potential next. Now, the other thing we did with all these species, why do you care? This is why you should care. Because we put these species in cages with mangoes. This is the Fairchild farm. And we would breed, we would cross those things, and we did this for about 15 years. Next slide. And actually, this picture was taken a couple weeks ago. This is one of the interspecific hybrids. Okay? So that is a new hybrid between two different genera. Okay, so this is not a mango, and it's not a buapalum. It is a whole new thing. All right, Now, it's also completely tolerant of anthracnose. It does get bacteria. So not for me. For my kids' generation, maybe, but probably for my grandchildren. That's what this will be. All right, these will be mangoes that, and you all know, you guys we're all going through this idea of all the diseases that are up in Palm Beach, and whether it's a new disease or whether it's not a new disease with the bacteria and all that. We have bacterial black spot in Florida, all of those things. The longer you grow a crop, you will eventually have a disaster. All right? Case in point, citrus greening. Okay? How did citrus greening occur? All of the citrus grown in Florida were derived from a single sport that occurred back in China, a genetic sport that occurred back in China 1,000 years ago. All right? When you base your livelihood on something that happened at one time, it's not smart. So what this is really, we're shaking it all back up, and then it's going to be up to somebody else, hopefully a lot smarter than me, to come in and take those things and breed for the future of the disaster that will come. There will be a mango disaster one of these days. It'll come. All right? It's not, by the way, the stuff that's happening with bacterial black spot. That's not a disaster. That just means we got to work hard. That's all that means. Okay? Don't worry about that one. But there are things out there that could be a disaster. And we got to be ready for this. Next. So, meanwhile, we have a rebirth. What do I mean? Well, by the way, this is Big Saturn. I didn't have to give you a number. That's Big Saturn right there. This one also got named this year, the one up on the right. That's called Nebula. One of our celestial, those are two of our celestial series. You know why they're celestial series? It's because their flavor is out of this world. I'm here all week. Anyway, I like it. They gotta have names, so whatever. It is so much more fun now growing mangoes than it ever has been. It's only going to get better. We have new varieties. Literally every day that we're selling mangoes from Mango Man Homestead, we're always trying new varieties and trying them out, and if people really like them, then we keep them. If they're lousy, we cut them down and we move on. All right? So we are in the midst of the most amazing mango time ever. It's amazing. You'll never see anything like this. You guys are living in lucky times.
How does it compare to places like India? Are they doing selecting and breeding?
The trouble is, they're prisoners of their own history. They're prisoners of their own bias. So, for instance, when an Indian customer comes to our farm, they say, well, I want an Alfonso. And we say, no, you don't. And they, yes, we do. And you're going to lose this argument. Okay, you're going to lose this argument. Or they'll come to your farm and they want carry. Because carry was the one that we used in Florida to sell to Indian customers. Because it was one that had a flavor profile that is like. So they now have a bias towards carry. I have 10 things that are better than carry. But they're not carry. So they want carry. Okay. But I don't grow, we grow carry, but we'll only grow carry this year because we only had it this year because now I need space and it's going to get cut down. And we'll never have it again. So, you have to do what you have to do. So, but that's the problem in the rest of the world is that there are it's hard to deal with bias because they know what they already know. One of the biggest advances that ever occurred in mango, the biggest learning that I ever did, was when I went to South Africa, where they don't know that they don't know anything about mangoes. That's great. It's wonderful when people don't know that they're ignorant. Yeah, no, it's wonderful because that means you can come in there. It doesn't mean they're stupid. I mean, they're smart. And they're adapting something to their way. So they're looking at things in a totally different way. So what I did over my whole career, I would go into breeding collections around the world. And I go in there with fresh eyes. So for instance, where did so many of our mangoes from our little farm come from? We're out of Gary's breeding collection from all of the years, because Gary and I worked together, and I'd go in there with very different eyes than he. I don't have his bias. I can always tell you what mango Gary will pick. It's whatever Giselle says. All right. Come on now. Come on, Dad. Work with me. Giselle's his wife. Oh, I didn't say anything like that. Giselle's his wife. Whatever your wife picks, that's the one you're going to have. But if you want to have a happy household, all right. So, but I didn't, I will go in there actually and I see things differently than they do. And that's the true in South Africa, that's the true if you've ever, so I have a mango out of South Africa called Nel Petit that came out of the breeding program in Nelspruit. It's too small, the South Africans don't care about it, because it doesn't ship. They're 24 days from Europe. So if you grow a mango that can't ship to Europe, you got to eat a lot of mangoes. And they don't have a local business. You can't do anything locally. This is the incredible, I'm getting ahead of myself, but here, let's go on and I'll answer your question. The incredible thing is, we sit here in Florida. Yes, it rains. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, all of those things. But you know what? You can grow this mango, and we have customers that will come and buy it and enjoy it, and you can make it cost effective because we have the information and we have the genetics. Okay, so this is the most advanced horticultural place in the world. Just to give you an idea, when you go to Borneo and you walk into it and they're standing in front of a 90, 100-foot tree, they'll say to you, wow, how big are your trees? And I'll say, and they say, so how do you do that? And I said, we prune. And they'll look at you and they'll be like, well, yeah, we can't do that. Why? It's, again, bias. They don't because you don't manage. Go back 30 years when I got out of University of Florida, 40 years. And I went to Virginia Tech. And you walk up there, and I go, and I was trained in peaches and apples. And they teach you how to prune peaches and apples, right? And you say, I look at that, and everyone says, well, can't afford land anymore. You have to keep dwarf trees, and you have to prune. It's the only way to survive in the apple industry. I leave Virginia Tech, and I'm a pruning fool, okay? I can prune everything. I've been taught by the best, and boom, I come back here to Florida. University of Florida, the extension will have out there on the old pruning bulletin from 30 years ago, when you walked into this door, it said, how to manage tropical fruit trees. Tropical fruit trees do not need any pruning. That was the first thing that it used to say. Well, hello, that's wrong. Okay? Yeah, if you want to have a 50-foot tree, it doesn't need any pruning. But if you want to have a tree that's short, you need good genetics and you need to prune it. All right? So, we have all of the tools to do it now. And to do incredible things. Okay? Just like if you're on a river in Lawas, Sarawak, Borneo, and you're growing buah kamut right here, and this is their family, that's their tree. Just like that tree is adapted to being grown there. Next. It's the same thing for us. We're planting new trees, intergeneric hybrids, not mangoes, not wild mangoes, whole new things. They're going to have crazy names. Probably have to name them all after my wife in the end. By the way, you don't know, that's a tough one because my dad always taught me, he said, never name a fruit after a loved one, yourself or a loved one. Because what happens if it goes bad, right? You know, not my relationship, I mean the mango. What happens if it's a bad mango, right? Not my relationship, please, don't get me wrong. But anyway, eventually the trouble was if your sister-in-law gets a mango named after her, then you got to name a mango after her. So that's how that comes about. But anyway, so we're at the same point. We're now making mangoes, growing things that are dwarf, disease tolerant, incredible to eat, all different, and everyone is going to have to be recalibrated about this. I mean, it's not Kansas anymore, okay? It's changing. Yeah.
So when you do this science, which is what it is, are you taking away the natural, if you like, God-given nutrients?
No. Okay, so first of all, none of this is our GMOs. This is good old-fashioned breeding. Take the tree, take another tree, put them in a cage. What we did is, I'm old school. I'm not a geneticist. I'm a horticulturist. Proudly, okay? Geneticists seem to think that we're lower forms of beings, right? I'll tell you right now, geneticists, anyone can learn to be a geneticist. Because if you can learn to cook, you can learn to be a geneticist. Not anyone can learn to be a horticulturalist. Because a horticulturist, you have to manage that living being. And to me, that's a lot more of a complication. Because you got to sit there, again, we didn't do any gene insertion in any of that. I was at a place at Fairchild where, first of all, our constituents wouldn't accept it. All right? There were no GMOs allowed at Fairchild. We were told that, and so we bred without GMOs. So it was a tree in a cage. I raised bees. So the only bad thing that you can ever put on my soul is I made little hives of bees and put them inside cages and watched a lot of them die. It's not a good way for your soul to work. It's tough on your bees, put them in a little cage. Not good. And that hurt. But we tricked the bees too. Take the flowers out, put them in the hive, force them there. Honeybees don't like mangoes, but honeybees like wild mangoes. So you can use the wild mangoes to draw the bees. Or you could take the wild mango flowers and put them in the hive and get them to go to the, and then strip off all of the flowers and get them to go to the mango, which is what we did too. So the thing is, I really never, I use the genetics, but again, I think the problem is when you look at the horticulture of a tree and you look at it when you're growing them in different, there's so much expression difference that that's why I don't believe in just going by straight genetics, because expression, genes will get turned, and I work a lot, if any of you, we haven't even talked about disease control or anything. We do everything with biorational fungicides and everything else. We don't use any pesticides, so all of the biorational, that whole area of pest control is based on expression. So the humic acid and the fulvic acids and all those things will actually turn on genes in the right, and so it's what will take as a grower. A grower is going to have to be a lot smarter for how to use it, because when you're turning on, when you're messing with expression, and you're not just killing everything, you got to be really intuitive. You have to really watch and learn and understand the whole thing. I mean, you don't see any herbiciding and everything else. Mangoes can't take fungicide. I mean, herbicides. Forget it. You want to do the best thing for your mango tree? Quit herbicide. Simple. Just quit herbicide. Don't do it. All right? And I don't care what herbicide it is. Don't do it. They're so sensitive, their feeder roots. You're killing the feeder roots. All right? So that's... did that answer your question then? Yeah, okay. Because I kind of ran. But, next. So, now, let me show you something. This is what I mean. That is 100-hectare mango farm in Nayarit, Mexico. Okay? That's the one I manage, right? So, think about that. And then you think about that little picture of my son doing the tipping on a little tree in our little orchard. There is more horticulture going on in our little half acre than is going on in here. And I assure you, I'll tell you why. Because here we use herbicides, we use pesticides, we use all those things. We don't use our brains. We use chemicals. That's the problem. Now, we've done a lot of changes, so we try to, because we're my company, that's what we try to do. We try to get out of that. But still, there's only so much horticulture that you can do at this scale. It's a scaling issue. On a quarter acre, I can do anything. You guys can do anything you want. If you have the right genetics and the time, you can do anything. It's amazing. You can't do anything here. I assure you. Next slide. And that's why. Because you gotta pack all those mangoes into those boxes and send them every day. All right? It is not easy. Not easy. This is what I'm talking about scaling. Next slide. Again, what I said, I'm rather simple about the way I look at things. We went back to old school. This is a Campbell back in 1890 something. And they would pack them in their wood crates with their straw, wrap them in paper, and ripen them up. And I'll bet you what, I'm going to tell you right now, those are better mangoes than you would buy in a grocery store nowadays. Next slide. And so, that's fun. That's fun. Right there, that's fun. Okay? That challenges your brain, that challenges your palate. We live here, you can grow all of those things here. They all taste different, they all look different, they all have disease. If they have a little spot on them, you explain it to people. You say, hey, there's a spot of anthracnose on here. Big deal. Doesn't hurt anybody. It's a fungus. Not going to hurt you. Not going to hurt anybody. The reason it's there is because I don't want to go spraying a bunch of fungicides on them. All right? It's amazing what you can do here with mangoes.
How do you keep them so clean?
Biorations. So what they are is they're antagonistic. It's a whole system. Pruning, So first, let's start. Genetics, pruning, biorationals, and remember, the best disinfectant in the world is the sun. That's why you got to keep your tree small. You have to keep your tree with air movement. The other great disinfectant is air movement. So we orient our rows to the prevailing winds. Make sure the wind's always blowing through. Timely application of your biorationals. So biorationals are products, they're like fungi that compete with the bad fungi. So I use actinovate and I use different ones, but they compete with the bad fungi. They're not bad, they're just damaging fungi, the anthracnose, the alternarias, and all that. Now, the other big secret about the whole thing is you don't worry about what made this fruit look like this happened 4 months ago. That's the key. You don't get an infection. The infections occur at fruit set and when the fruit are very small. When they get older, when there's more age on the tree, they are much more tolerant of fungi and bacteria. And so the big key is you control disease at bloom and small fruit set, and then you keep good air movement, good sunshine, and you make sure that the other big thing about having a tree small is they don't blow around in the wind. When you blow around in the wind, you're going to get cuts on them. That allows pathogens to get in. This is your best protection. The skin is actually, of most of these mangoes that have good tolerance, the skins are pretty tolerant. But once those skins break open, there is no resistance to anything in the flesh of this fruit. The resistance is in the skin. So that's your line of defense. Now, I really can't, I look at a lot of my friends out here who do, just like I'm not a good geneticist, I'm also not a good, what do you call it, permaculture, all that kind of, I wasn't trained in any of this. What I do is I just know what works for me, all right? And I know that's the way I've always grown mango. Instead of calling it permaculture and all that, I call it old school, okay? It's old school, and that's what it is. It's old school. And that's what I mean about you have to be smart. You got to be real smart, because look, I don't ever sweat insects. Name me an insect that's a problem on mangoes besides fruit fly. And if you want to deal with fruit fly, if we ever do get fruit fly, there's going to be one thing you're going to have to do. Bag your fruit. Simple. I'm going to tell you that's what you're going to have to do, because I'm not going to be out there killing fruit flies. Now, you can also, there's also baits and there's other ways to do it. You do a lot of sanitation, get the fruit out, and, so there's ways to deal with it. There are mitigation ways that we forget, we've forgotten, because we got chemicals, and we were told by the man, we were told by the people that want to sell products that you got to use that stuff, all right? When you go to a garden club, Home Depot, Lowe's, all that stuff, right? When you go there, what's the biggest section in the garden section? Chemicals. That's a travesty, my friends. That's a travesty. That's a horrible travesty that we're doing to ourselves. It's terrible. I mean, come on. Are you telling me that, and look, hey, I get it. I totally get it. I sit down with Sam's Club, Walmart, Costco's, Kroger's, every single grocery store you can name. I sit down with those guys. And I can't talk to them like this. I can't. Because, again, they'll say, oh, no, you as a customer of their store will not accept a blemish on your fruit. Well, I don't know. You talk to your customer, you might find out. Look at Whole Foods, okay? They figured out how to do it. We supply, my company, not my kids' company, but my big company that I work for. We supply 3 million boxes to Whole Foods. And Whole Foods, I do live email with Whole Foods customers all the time. So as a company, I answer questions from consumers at Whole Foods. So if you send something to, when you buy our mangoes and it has a sticker on it, and it has, you go to our website and you contact our website, you're talking to me. Which takes a lot of time. But hey, you know what? I tell them, they say, oh, I got a little white spot on inside the fruit. And I say, hey, that's called spongy tissue. It happens when you do hot water treatment. And by the way, hot water treatment is not hot water treatment. It's a hot water bath. There's no chemicals in the hot water bath that our mangoes go through. No, there's no chemicals. It's an absolutely green treatment. And we look at it in the wrong way as an industry. We say, oh, it's a treatment. Why do you call it a treatment? It's a bath. We take a bath. We don't take treatments when we go take a bath. I've never done a beauty treatment in my life, okay? I take a bath. That's what I do. And that's what we do to the mangoes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad to see like mangoes from India and stuff, they're using irradiation in different parts of the world.
Yep. And that's why, me personally, I do not support radiation. I do not. I mean, look, I just choose to not eat irradiated foods. I just don't like it. But that's me. I don't know whether it's bad. I don't know. But I just don't do it.
I remember years ago reading a report where they irradiated milk to young children in India and they all developed leukemia. And you don't see that report anymore. But.
Right. All I know is when you go to the dentist and they put that coal irradiated, they put that big thing over me all the time, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, no, there's something wrong here. I'm like, I'm like, yeah. And the woman leaves the room, right? You know, yeah, you're leaving me here. I said, no, I don't like this idea. But anyway, hey, again, all of that stuff. This is what means I don't have to worry about all that stuff. I'm telling you. This is the most fun that I have in my life. Okay, this is what I do that is so much fun. Those are my 3. This is a couple years ago, when my middle son looked like a caveman. But they run the mango thing. I'm just laboring. Okay, and it's great because it teaches them how to do these things and all the varieties, and it's fabulous. And this is what you guys can do. Yeah, and again, there's no way I'm gonna put my kids to go and spray a bunch of stuff in the grow. No way. I'm not gonna do it. It's not worth it. So again, I avoid it. I avoid it through good genetics. I avoid it by trying to grow these new intergeneric hybrids that we have. I avoid it by growing, these are not, this one is from the 40 years of collecting that occurred 40 years ago, okay? So these are just coming on now. Now, I can tell you right now, there are 2 trees. They're this big. So, you know, these will all be gone by the time I get home today, okay? Right? But next year there'll be more, and next year there'll be more. And I got to tell you, I spent a whole. You see the next slide? Yeah, that's the last one. So I spent most of my life trying to get Walmarts, Costco's, and those people to listen to me because I wanted to change the world. When I was younger, I thought I could change the world. I got pretty disillusioned after 20 years at Fairchild because none of those big marketing companies would ever listen to me. They just thought I was a wacko scientist. That's it, right? I'm a scientist to them. And even though I've eaten more mangoes than any of those guys had ever seen or heard of, but I was just a theoretical scientist guy, right? And no one cared. Then one day, I don't know what happened. It happened when I was giving a lecture once at a produce marketing association, and I cast aspersions at the Ataulfo mango, right? Which is, my company grows Ataulfo, but the trademark is champagne, which means it's a mango grown to my growing protocols. Essentially what it is. It's the same mango. It's not a different variety. But it tastes different and everything because it's all about details, all right, and doing it right. So I cast aspersions about Ataulfo because of the concept of, for growers, what the implications were. All right, growers couldn't make money, and that started. I suddenly was on the radar. Okay, I used to have protection when I used to have guards when I was traveling to Chiapas, where that mango is from, because seriously, they tried to burn our packing shed down. It was very bad. It got very bad. So that's when I learned that maybe people were actually listening, and I just didn't notice, or they did. I wasn't able to find a way to combine it all. But through it all, the one thing I gotta say is, it was always amazing. I always looked at it as start out small and control what you can control, and then let them figure it out. If they want to come, I got the guy coming from Sam's Club soon, going to come visit me. I will not mention this mango to him. He cannot understand. Now, maybe I'm being unkind. Maybe he can understand. But I can't take that risk, first. And secondly, so what if he likes it? He's going to say, wow, I want to support you to... This conversation happened about a couple months ago. We want to pay to develop this mango, right? And I said, well, first of all, I don't own it. Okay? My kids own it. So my kids do. So that was a good out right there. I said, if you negotiate, you got to negotiate with my kid. Okay? But, secondly, I said, look, no. Where do you want to grow this? Oh, we're going to have to grow it in Mexico. Okay? Well, I don't live in Mexico. And I travel and I work a lot in Mexico. A lot. It's dangerous. Okay? You can't go around drug trafficking, a lot of problems. Okay? I live in Homestead. I live right down the road here, or a couple miles down the road. I like living in South Florida. Lovely. You know? We got our problems, but I can grow all these mangoes in my backyard. I don't have anyone telling me what to do. It's the best thing in the world. That's what you guys have. You guys, every one of you guys could do a small mango operation. When I say small, it's all about scale. You gotta know what you can take care of. All right? My 10-year plan is you're gonna find me over on my porch in 10 years. I'm gonna be sitting on my porch and I'm gonna be selling you mangoes if you want to buy my mango. But before you buy a mango, I'm gonna say, Richard, sit down. I want to tell you a story first. Okay? And I'm just going to tell you a story. Did y'all ever know, any of y'all remember Anset? The old guy, the old man that lived in Pinecrest that used to sell his nursery? He had a nursery of very special trees, fruit trees. He would not sell you a tree unless you listened to one of his stories, right? That's what I'm going to do to all of you, okay? You're not going to get to buy a mango from me. If I'm selling that day, I'm going to tell you a story. Otherwise, forget it. Get out of here. Get out of here. If you don't have time to listen to a story, I don't got time to sell you. Okay? It's what's fun. That's what my 3 kids, I want them to learn to love mangoes. They may end up working for a big company, something like that, probably, who knows? whatever they're going to end up doing. But you know what? They'll always have that love for this fruit. I can never mistreat this fruit because there is no other fruit that's as amazing as a mango. Nothing. No way, no how, forget about it. Everyone tries to write about it. You always try to make pomegranate and everything. Give me a break. Give me a break. Apples. Okay, I don't know if you guys ever, you go to the grocery store now. How many different kinds of apples are there? There are millions of them, okay? Everybody's got an apple. Some are good, some are not good. That was what my dream was for mango 35 years ago. All right? We weren't able to do it. So I pulled back. We got Mango Man Homestead. Again, the only difference is if you guys, you got to listen to the stories, okay? You got to figure out how when we ship mangoes, how I put a story in there. I don't know, maybe I need a chip or something, and I can tell a story. But that is the amazing thing, you know. And then maybe the next generation who will be smarter than me can make it happen. But I'll tell you right now, it is phenomenal what we can do with mangoes just right now. And it's only getting better. Only going to get better. I mean, when people, if I go back and look at what it was the first time that we used to actually run the Mango Forum and the old Ag Fiesta inside this room years ago. And when I was a small kid. And if when people would ask you, people would bring in mangoes to identify. And they were always the same, you know. It was always Glenn, Tommy, Kit, Ken, maybe a Palmer, Irwin, something like that, okay? It's always the same. Nowadays, my God, you don't know what you're going to see. You know, there's all sorts of stuff out there. That's cool, right? And by the way, somebody ever bring, I don't know if y'all ever, when I used to do the thing at Fairchild, when people would come up and my sons would work the table too, and they would come and ask me to identify a mango, then they would not believe me and they would go want to double check it with my sons. Don't do that to me, okay?
Not proud.
You do that, I'm going to invite you to leave. Yeah. Anyway, are there any other questions? I don't know, what's our timing? How do we do this?
Right, so the timing is open-ended.
Oh, okay.
When we leave here, we go down the road to the Fruit and Spice Park. The side gate will be open on 187 Avenue. There'll be a young man directing you guys in to park in the side field where the mango sampling tent is. So, and your little badge is your admission to that. So don't peel them off and throw them away when you walk out the door here.
Are you going to let me in? I don't have a badge.
You're definitely coming in because you have to continue to regale us.
All right.
As we sample and eat. And by the way, I've already got it figured out. They'll pay for the story. The mango is separate. So you're selling the story. The mango is the secondary.
Well, and the other good thing that I never have, I was telling some people yesterday, I think, that if you ever want to know the real secret of my stories, it's kind of like those CDs they used to make that have alternate endings. Okay? You can request an ending. It's okay. And I can give you a different ending if you like it, so it's all good. You had a question back here?
Your plants in Mexico, the fields, obviously they got to be picked when they're not ripe, still green. What's the reduction in flavor, do you think, by the time they hit the store?
So, one of the misnomers of mango and Indians know this. We changed the rules and we were wrong when we did it, okay? The best flavored mango is one that ripens up in about less than like a week off the tree for most varieties. That's the best for both flesh texture and flavor. your sugar content does not get higher if you let it ripen on the tree. In fact, it's lower. All right, so you can actually, as long as you can get a mango to market within 10 days of picking, you have no reduction at all in flavor. In fact, you can do better flavor.
How do you know when to pick it then?
You have to know how to pick it. And so every variety is different. So some varieties go by the shoulders. So when we pick in Mexico, for instance, in a big commercial operation, we pick on shape and then on bricks, sugar content. And so, we cut them and you check. Now there's a variation within a tree from different bloom types, but then it comes down to having really good pickers. You have to have people that know mangoes and know how to pick them. And that's probably the hardest thing right now, is getting people and keeping people that know how to pick. Now so we don't allow any mango to ripen on the tree in our orchard, here, ever. We pick everything up and ripen it up off the tree. There's another reason it's good to do it too, is they don't get eaten by squirrels, they don't get stolen by your neighbor, they don't get eaten by woodpeckers, whatever. Woodpeckers are always, if woodpeckers are going to your fruit, they should have already been off the tree.
What's your process of letting them ripen? Refrigeration?
So the best way to ripen up a mango off the tree is room temperature with air movement, out of the sun. So on a porch with a fan at 80 to 85 degrees. That's the best. Now, commercially speaking, it's very hard to do that because no one will accept that. My company, we run our and what the big key about what makes our mangoes, what makes a champagne and not the woeful, again, the same variety, but what makes it taste different and have a better quality is we do not cool them to nearly as low a temperature. And everyone knows better than me, but I will tell you they're all wrong. If you take a mango down to below 54 degrees, the refrigerator's at about 40. Okay, so if you put a mango in a refrigerator, you kill it. It will not ripen. You can put a ripe mango in the refrigerator and it'll hold it, but it's still lowering the quality. Okay? Every mango has a timing. And the best, and sometimes weather gets in the way. When it's raining every day, it's really hard to do a good job of ripening mangoes. But you get them off the tree when they're ready to come off the tree, put them at room temperature, good air movement. The best place to ripen up a mango is in Ratnagiri, India. But I don't live in Ratnagiri, India, so I got to make the what do. Humidity's too high here is part of the problem. Now, again, that depends on variety. So it's tough on the Indian mangoes. Malacca, Alfonso, Jumbo Queso, stuff like that are very hard to ripen up. Right. But you always put them, I like to put those at like 85 or higher. Fan blowing all the time. And boxes that allow airflow, open, preferably open. And one of the big problems with that are rats. Rats like mangoes. So you got to put them in your porch with your dog. Dogs are the best control method for raccoons, rats, possums, all that stuff. Okay. Squirrels. Yeah. Squirrels will rarely come onto your porch, but they will. Yeah. They will. And dogs have a little trouble with squirrels. Just keep the trees away so that they can't get there. That's really the best way to ripen them. I mean, this mango here has been off the tree for a week. All right? And it's just now ripening. This will actually be 10 days before I eat it. But this variety is really good about a longer time. All of the Indian mangoes we sell, for instance, all have been ripened up for at least 10 days before we sell them. And by the way, one of the big things happening in commercial mangoes is we have ripening programs. So we're one of the real pioneers of doing a good job of ripening up mangoes so that every day when someone goes into the grocery store, they can buy a ripe mango. Because most people don't know how to buy a good mango. So you have a question here.
I have an experience that I was told that you might be able to help me.
Okay.
So,
Not an exorcism or something, no. Go ahead.
I have to talk about
Okay.
for your program. I have a tree. It's really 3 mango trees all coming from the same root, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And there is an insect that's eating the inside.
Okay, it's a borer, yeah.
I have photographs, and I wonder if you can tell me. I was told the best thing was to cut it down, cut the tree down. Now,
Who told you that?
neighbors. Neighbors.
Oh. I'll tell you, borers, and this was probably because you got cold and it got cold damage?
Yes.
Yeah, that's normally when it happens.
February.
Yeah. That's one where sometimes you have to go to if you want to save the tree, you have to go to a chemical solution. Which means there are tree drench systemic insecticides that you can apply to your tree. It is a drastic measure, but it works. Sometimes you have to do that following cold. And they're very, I don't know what house, I won't mention any names of anything because some of them are legal, some aren't. The best thing to do would be to get a tree service and, yeah, that's grass. Oh. No. Hold on. Yeah, you actually have dead areas on the outside. So that's actually an ambrosia beetle. The best thing to do with that one is cut off the bark. So where it's dead under there. It'll be dead under there. So wherever that's coming out of, that's dead. You need to cut that away, and you can actually paint that then with just a good tree paint. Cut the bark away. Yeah, because it's dead under there. If they're putting out that frass, it's dead. I don't mean the whole tree is dead. It has dead parts.